today is Raj Mehta, and he'll be talking about painkiller addiction and who's really at fault. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Can you guys hear me out there? All right. Is it the best and the brightest in this room here? We have the best and the brightest of the future in this room, is that correct? Yes? It's an honor to be here. My name is Raj Mehta. I'm a therapist, worked at Brighton Hospital for about 4 years. A locally famous rapper got sober there. You might have heard of it, right? Okay, so with regards to addiction, I want to make this a little bit real. Does anybody in this room know an addict or a person with a drug problem? Look around. Now, put the hands down. Does anybody know a person in this room who has an addiction to a prescription drug? Wow, isn't that chilly? Doesn't that say something about where we're at today? So I want to cover this information. I want your guys' permission to be honest. I have a weird part of my life right now where I tell the truth to people, and I get in trouble for telling the truth. So do I have your guys' permission to tell the truth? All right, so we can move forward. Thank you. All right, the question is Pharmageddon upon us? Pharmageddon is a concept where we get to the point where the drugs do more damage than they do good. And that's kind of deep, isn't it? And we talk about a disease. Has anybody ever heard of addiction being referred to as a disease? Okay, and so what does that mean? A person has a disease. Even outside of addiction, a person has diabetes, a person has cancer. What does that actually mean? Right, there's something wrong. They're out of the dis of ease, right? They're out of comfort. And so the idea is it's an abnormal state. So let me ask you a question. A disease is defined by symptoms and treatable. According to the AMA, for anything to be a disease, diabetes, cancer, whatever, it must meet 2 criteria. It must have symptoms and be treatable. And if it's a really good disease, it's even testable. So addiction, by its very definition, is a biopsychosocial disease. Is that making sense? A square is defined by 4 equal sides of equal length, right? If you look at a square and someone says that's not a square, you can't argue about that. That's what the definition is. So addiction is a disease. You can argue about how somebody got the disease, but you can't argue about what a disease is. And by the way, if addiction was not a disease, how come the brains of addicts scan differently than the brains of non-addicts? Is that helpful to understand? All right, so we're talking about Pharmageddon, we're talking about diseases. Addicts, when they use drugs and alcohol, use to stop feelings and start feelings. If a person's had a really rough life, has PTSD from being in the war, they might have some really bad memories and trauma. They might drink not to think. They might use not to feel. They use drugs or alcohol to stop a bad feeling. Or if they're at a party, use drugs and alcohol to start a good feeling. So addicts have consequences when they use, they have cravings to use, they have an issue with control. When a person has a drug or alcohol problem, they make an attempt to control their using. And oftentimes they have consequences when they use. By the way, what would be a consequence of a person with a drug addiction? Anybody give an example of a consequence or a symptom of addiction? Right? How about physical health? How about bad liver? Right? How about damage to their physical person? How about anxiety and depression? Right? How about handcuffs? Law enforcement keeps showing up, right? Suicide, depression, absolutely. And so addiction is a disease, and it's got consequences or symptoms when a person uses, and it's testable and treatable. That's the most important thing. It is very treatable. Let's talk about OxyContin today and how this meets the archetype of the perfect drug that created all kinds of problems in America. Has anyone ever heard of OxyContin before? That's pretty amazing. Okay, what is this drug used for in its correct sense? Pain, especially for cancer pain, that kind of pain. So a company called Purdue Pharma, which is a privately held corporation, decided to reformulate this drug. Remember, OxyContin and oxycodone is the actual drug in OxyContin. Oxycodone's been around for a long time. They couldn't actually re-patent that, right? But they patented a way of delivering it. It's called a delivery system. They said, in this pill, we have little OxyContin pebbles in there, right? And they break off over time. They went to doctors, they went to all these doctors and told them this drug cannot be abused because it breaks down slowly over time. And they sold the doctors all these lies, and they also gave them false charts and graphs. And the way I can say this is because Purdue Pharma pled guilty in federal court to doing all these things. They said, hey, we're very sorry, we lied to doctors, said it was non-addictive, it couldn't be abused, and lots of people died and got strung out. And how many people went to jail for that at Purdue Pharma? Wow. If you get caught with one of those pills, you better get ready to do some jail time. Isn't that interesting? It's pretty powerful. So no one went to jail. They paid a fine of $600 million, roughly. Is that impressive? Pretty good fine? Well, not really when you're making $3 billion a year off the pill in profits. It's kind of the price of doing business. So, you guys know about this pill right here. That's your OxyContin. Guess what that pill was worth in 2010? What would impress you? $80. Now, who's good at math? If you have an $80 pill and you get prescribed 90 of those, what's that worth in that bottle? Is there an incentive to get some prescriptions for that pill? So people started complaining. They said everyone's dying from OxyContin. It's causing all kinds of problems, right? They put all kinds of pressure on Purdue Pharma. And do you guys know how Jell is made? Anybody ever made Jell from gelatin? You pour the water into the gelatin mix. Yeah. And what happens? Right. So when addicts used this pill, they were crushing it up and snorting it, crushing it up and injecting it. And so for a long time, there's been this anti-abuse method called a jelly effect, where you can put this little chemical inside the pill, and if someone tries to crush it up and snort it, it turns into a jelly in their nose or a jelly in their syringe, and those addicts have a really bad day, right? So after a lot of pressure in 2010, Purdue Pharma agreed to change the formula of that pill. And Blue Cross and Blue Shield does an analysis of all their prescribing, right? Guess what the change was in prescriptions for OxyContin as soon as they made it non-abusable? 40% drop in prescriptions for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So their assessment was that 40% of all people that were getting OxyContin prescriptions weren't using it correctly or for the right reasons. But that's for insurance type people. The other studies showed that the prescriptions for OxyContin for cash paying clients dropped 50%. Is that remarkable? So everybody knows right now that we can actually prevent people from dying by having this gelling effect on these pills. Okay? And how come Big Pharma doesn't want to do that? Why would a company put something in their pills to decrease sales of their pills? Right? Unless they really care, right? And the idea behind that is that basically they said there's no studies that prove that putting that gel in that pill prevents abuse, because they paid for the studies and didn't pay for one. Remember, when you're the company that pays for all the studies, you can pick and choose what you study, and by doing that, you can influence the outcome. And you can say with a straight face, there's no proof this works. But we in this room all have common sense, right? Is it helpful to understand? We know that does work, and it does help people. So running some numbers, OxyContin gets pretty expensive. So if I had an OxyContin habit, what might I do to save money? Use a different drug. So at $28,000 an ounce, what's the cost of heroin per ounce? Anybody know that? Anybody know what an ounce of heroin costs? You can go on DEA.org and find out, but I'm just saying, not from the streets, but, you know. Give me a price on that? $600? $8,000 an ounce. Is that better than 28,000? And it's 10 times stronger per milligram. So more bang for your buck. And who provides us in America with the best high-quality heroin on a consistent and reliable basis? Who does that? The Sinaloa drug cartel. Anybody know about El Chapo? El Chapo is a billionaire, and I'm not. Right? So, El Chapo is a billionaire. They put him in a prison, right? And they built him a mile-long tunnel. And that tunnel came up in his prison cell, and they took him out on a motor scooter. Anybody impressed by that at all? Please say you're impressed. That's a hell of a tunnel, okay? So people are saying we're going to build a wall to stop the drugs from coming in. And honestly, that's kind of insulting to the Sinaloa drug cartel, isn't it? And by the way, how many employees does El Chapo have in his organization worldwide? 100,000 people work for El Chapo. That's a pretty good business, right? And how many of those people have aunts and uncles and cousins that work in law enforcement and as border guards and as airplane pilots? Are we going to stop El Chapo? No. Yeah, right? And so other drugs are very expensive too, but let's talk about the price of gold. Isn't the standard of wealth throughout the world gold? Right? So what's the price of gold right now today? Anybody check? About 1,300? So Oxycontin and heroin and cocaine are more expensive than gold. Is anybody impressed by that besides me? Does that say something? So how does a person become an addict? Anybody have an idea behind this flow chart? How does a person become a heroin addict now? Curiosity, but they got to use certain things, don't they? There are multiple pathways into addiction. You see cigarettes, alcohol, and marijuana, and why those are listed there? Because most people have their first euphoria, their first buzz from one of those three items right there. And I ask my clients, please rate the effect of smoking a cigarette when you were 13. The buzz was like a 3 or a 4. Please rate the alcohol buzz when you were 14 or 15. I was about a 5. Please rate your marijuana buzz. I was about a 5 or a 6. And so there's different gateways and pathways into addiction. There is no one way into addiction. Is it making sense? And so when people first use these drugs, what happens to their brains? What happens on a subconscious level? They realize they can change how they feel almost instantaneously, and your brain doesn't forget that. That's called euphoric recall. That's powerful, isn't it? And so when a person has an experience, now they begin trying different pills. Now in the old days, we didn't have access to narcotics like you guys do, because America is 5% of the world's population. And guess how much percentage of the world's Vicodin we consume? 99%. We have 99% of the world's pain? I don't think so. We consume 80% of the world's opiates, and we're 5% of the world's population. Is there a possibility that we're being overprescribed? Okay, and so they try Vicodin, codeine, or Suboxone. Those are Schedule 3 narcotics, right? They're controlled substances. And they feel a buzz, they feel a high. And I say, what does that feel like? They give me euphoria, a 7 or an 8. And then they go on to Schedule 2 narcotics, Oxycontin, morphine, Opana, fentanyl, Dilaudid, methadone. And I say, what did that feel like? It's like a 9. And then when people become addicted to those drugs right there, they move on to heroin. And so what's the problem with heroin besides obviously that it's illegal?
Most people can't stop using it.
Yeah, and it kills people all the time because El Chapo, part of the reason why I really hate him is he cuts all his heroin right now with fentanyl. And that kills people. He has got some of the strongest heroin floating around. It's cut with fentanyl and people die. And those people are often my clients or parents that come to see me after their kids are dead. And Macomb County's been hit really, really hard with this. We lose one person per day in Macomb County from a heroin overdose. And I want you guys to be fed up with that. That needs to end. We know how it happens. 80% of people that become heroin addicts follow this pathway into addiction. It always begins with abusing Vicodins, Oxycontin, Opana, and morphine pills that are being overprescribed. Now, who's giving people those pills?
Doctors.
Did you guys do that? I didn't do that. Who gave them those pills?
Doctors.
Those guys swear an oath to do no harm? I think they did. Let's go on to the next slide. So there's a book called the DSM-5. Anybody familiar with that book at all? It's a very important book. It covers all kinds of mental health illnesses, right? This is the go-to book. I use it all the time. I do all kinds of evaluations for court, mental health evaluations for CPS, all that kind of stuff, right? So every mental health disorder that you could have is in that book right there. But the DSM-4 was different. The DSM-5 changed the criteria for addiction. This is very powerful. Now, withdrawal intolerance occurring under a doctor's care doesn't meet criteria for addiction. Okay, so what does that mean to you guys? It means that if your doctor gets you strung out on Vicodin or Oxycontin or Opana, and you say to the doctor, hey, I can't get off this stuff and I'm going through really bad withdrawals, I think you mistreated me, he can say, you're not having any kind of addiction, you're under my care. If you get the same pills illegally off the streets, you qualify for addiction. But if it comes from a doctor, it doesn't qualify for addiction. Why would they change the book like that?
Because a high percentage of people got it.
If you go to court, what can he say? You want to go to rehab? Rehab says, we can't pay for this. You're under the care of a doctor. You don't need inpatient treatment. You need a better doctor. You see how it causes all kinds of problems? And in this book, they begin to change the words of diseases. You guys ever hear what's called manic depression back in the day? Manic depression? Who wants to have that disease? Sounds ugly. Manic depression. She's a manic depressive. And so Big Pharma said, we don't like that name. We want you to change it in your book. They said, what do you want to call it? Let's call it bipolar disorder. Wow. Sounds prettier. More palatable. Right? And what happened to prescriptions for bipolar disorder when that name was changed from that same disease? Prescriptions went up because people had less stigma asking for help, right? Because they had bipolar disorder. They were not manic. And so they changed the names, and now they want to have a new disease called grieving disorder. You guys ever lose anyone that you care about, someone in your life has ever died? Does that feel bad? Is it normal to feel bad when somebody dies? My mom died 7 weeks ago. It felt really effing bad, right? And so they want to have a disease, they couldn't get it in the DSM-5, they're going to work on the DSM-6, called bereavement disorder. And so doctors would say, did someone die recently in your life? And you say, yeah. Well, are you sad and depressed? You say, yeah. We got a pill for that. Thoughts on that? We got a pill for everything, right? If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything becomes a nail. You follow my logic on this? And so this is very important. If you're prescribed Vicodin for more than 30 days, what are the odds of you becoming Vicodin dependent? 25%. If you try heroin for the first time, what are the odds of you becoming heroin dependent? 50%. I have a philosophy. You don't have to eat dirt when it doesn't taste good. I recommend not trying certain things because of the safety issue and the harm reduction issue. Is that helpful? And so, changing these names in Blue Cross and Blue Shield, right now, anybody want to take a guess, how many people right now are prescription opioid dependent in America? 2 million people. Right now in your country, here in modern America, we have 2 million people that if they don't get that pill in their belly, they're going to get really sick, vomit, and diarrhea all over themselves and want to get that pill really, really bad. Okay? And how many heroin addicts are there in America right now? 500,000. So in your guys' America, who the adults gave you, I want to apologize on behalf of adults, all people in this room, they hand you in America with 2.5 million people that are dependent on opioids in one form or another. What's bad about that? Drugs prevent people from reaching their full potential. You can't be the person that you were meant to be. You can't be your authentic self when you're constantly craving drugs, avoiding consequences from using drugs, and trying to find a new way to use drugs in a functional manner and keep the heat off of you and keep your mind together, keep your self-esteem up. It's difficult, isn't it? All right. As far as deaths go, in 2014, we had 14,000 people die from prescription drug overdoses. And so in 2015 was the biggest change in American history. In 2015, for the first time, more people died from prescription drug overdoses than all illegal drugs combined together. I'll say it one more time. In 2015, more people died from prescription drug overdoses than all illegal drugs combined together. Elvis Presley never used any illegal drugs. Elvis Presley died of a drug overdose. Michael Jackson never used any illegal drugs. Michael Jackson died of a drug overdose. Prince allegedly never used any illegal drugs. Prince died of a drug overdose. How'd that happen?
Prescription.
So, you guys know about the idea behind linguistic philosophy and what's important to a culture? Say, for example, for the Inuit, there's 24 different words for snow because snow is very important to their culture, right? The most valuable real estate in America is on those corners, on mile roads, right? Very valuable real estate. What kinds of businesses do we find on those corners with valuable real estate in America? Banks, fast food, and what else? Drive-through pharmacies. right? How many slang terms are there for marijuana, heroin, and other drugs in America? More than 24? How many slang terms are there for money in America? More than 24? How many words are there for love in America? Just one. You could make the argument that in America, drugs, money, and fast food are very important to our culture. And when drugs, doctors, and money intersect, we seem to have all kinds of problems, right? So I'm going to prove that point. If you guys in this room are interested, you can go to a website called Dollars for Docs. So you got some time to kill. You want to say, I wonder how much money my doctor got from Big Pharma. And you can go online and check. That's an excellent example. Go Dollars for Docs, ProPublica, put your doctor's name in the search engine, discover how much money he's getting paid. Do you guys think that being given hundreds of thousands of dollars might influence a doctor's prescribing practices? Do lobbyists influence congressmen? I got in trouble. Doctor said, that money doesn't influence my prescribing at all. That money is for me to educate people on drugs. I said, all right, that's your argument. We're out of time, guys. Any comments or questions? I'm sorry for the short time. Any comments or questions about addiction, prescription drug addiction, things that tie into that? Yes.
How does like the government regulate pharmacies from give it like doctors and all that?
They don't. They go to court, in federal court, they say we're sorry, they get a few fines for a few $1 million, and that's it. There's no real punishment. No one goes to jail. But get caught with one Adderall, that's a felony. You guys know that. One Adderall in your pocket that doesn't belong to you is a felony. One Oxycontin in your pocket doesn't belong to you is a felony. Yep. Pardon me? I think that we should have doctors become more educated and people like you become more educated, understand what are the consequences and benefits from using this medication. How long should I use this medication for? I believe that education is very, very important. You guys are the future. And so as we begin to dispel this myth, we shouldn't have a pill for everything, right? Sometimes you should feel uncomfortable. Sometimes you should feel anxiety. Sometimes you should feel a little bit of pain in your knee. We as Americans have decided that we should never, ever be uncomfortable. Okay? Yes?
How long are you? Get him on the ground. Get him on the ground. Sir. Pulse.
What's his medical history?
I don't know.
They just picked him up 10 minutes ago.
You just picked him up?
Yeah, he's like, I need some money. Can you put me to work? And I said, yeah.
He's got a pulse. He's breathing, so.
You got bus?
Old days to become a junkie, you came from an inner city environment, you were probably a minority. Now it's this pathway into addiction from prescription drugs. And it's crossed over into white suburbia significantly. Yep. It's very difficult to say, it depends on the person. Me personally, I have a very high success rate, but I have a very interesting method of dealing with that. There's a shot people can get, it's called Vivitrol. If you get that shot and try to use an opiate, you don't feel any high at all whatsoever. And so there's all kinds of ways to treat addiction. But right now, Big Pharma wants to focus on giving addicts more pills. So if you have a heroin addiction, they want you on Suboxone or Methadone. And treatment is very expensive. Right in hospital is $500 a day without insurance. Any other questions? Yes. A little bit louder, please. What percent? It's hard to say. It depends on the person, right? But if you're taking drugs, it depends on what kind of drugs too. Vicodin and Oxycontin will lead to all kinds of problems. And I have a big problem with Adderall right now. So many people are taking Adderall. That's amphetamine salts. It's a chemical cause of methamphetamine. So it really depends. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, yep.
Do you have an idea of how many doctors themselves are addicted to prescription drugs?
I see many of them as clients. I can't give percentage, but it's a little bit higher than the U.S. population in general. Especially with, you'd be surprised, anesthesiologists have the highest rates of addiction. Access, candy store, right? Okay, we're out of time. Thanks everybody for sharing. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.